Welcome to Move the Stairs podcast. This is episode 110. We're recording on April 30th, 2026, and we're happy you're here joining us for this podcast.
Today, we thought we'd take a look back at the Kiss Cam viral moment. You all remember that when Astronomers, the company Astronomer CEO and HR person were caught kissing on the Kiss Cam. Unfortunately, they were married to other people.
Yeah, not ideal. Rather than the shot heard around the world, the kiss seen around the world resulted in the resignation of the CEO, followed several weeks later by the HR director also leaving the company. So today we're going to take a look back at that situation through the lens of brand protection PR and a recent survey that we conducted showing how business reputation is often impacted and keeps the majority of business owners up at night. And I'm sure this one did too.
I'm sure it did. I mean, holy moly, everybody in that company was definitely up. So the Astronomer situation really shows us how just one viral moment can have such an impact, not only on the full reputation, but on the governance and on the employee brand. I mean, if you think about how many tentacles this thing had, it was pretty crazy. And from a brand protection perspective, what should leaders do first to reassure their customers and their employees and any clients and vendors they have? What should they do so that they can still be worthy of the trust that they've built up?
I think a lot of companies, when this kind of thing happens, they go and they freeze.
Yes.
So I think one of the first moves is to establish control and some clarity. And this is where we always preach at M&C to always have a crisis plan in place. Why? Because then you'll know if something comes down, here's how we're going to handle this. Because when you think about it, the leaders should acknowledge real quickly, hey, we acknowledge the situation. And then remember, the audience you're talking to is not only your customer, but also your stakeholders, investors, perhaps. And you're showing that the company is stable, it's got it together, and we're taking steps. So it kind of gives like, oh, okay. You've got this. You're in charge. So it's not taking over the narrative or wishing it went away. It's showing, nope, we are engaged and we're acting decisively.
Yep.
I think there too, it's an interesting, we talk about always being prepared, but something that's so deeply personal as, extramarital things happening, it sort of feels like it's in a different category from a fire or serious bodily injury accident that happens on property. And I think that's, why a lot of times this goes overlooked. It's almost like it's too personal. So it's not brought up, which in and of itself could bring up HR concerns as well. Imagine being the person, pitching to the C-suite saying, hey, we should have a dark, statement just in case one of you sitting at this table does something naughty.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
How do you navigate that? I think that's a really good follow-up question. And Diane, like you are, disaster Diane. So how would you approach that with the C-suite?
Well, the first thing I think is interesting is when we did our survey, we asked what the top concerns were for CEOs at 2 a.m. in the morning. What were they really worried about? And business reputation was right at the top of that list. Would there be some type of a situation where the business found itself sometimes, in that situation, it's because something else happened in the industry. It has nothing to do with your business, or sometimes it really is brought home. So what I would say is, number one, I think every business, as far as their brand protection, should have a succession plan in place. Whether the leader is out because of kissing someone on a camera, or whether, heaven forbid, there's a plane crash or a car crash or something happens in their family and they have to leave right away. So there should always be a plan of what's going to happen in that situation. I mean, that's really important because continuity, and in any type of crisis, saying that we've thought through this and we have a plan and we're moving forward with that, makes all the difference, not only to your customers, but even more important to your employees. And I think in this scenario, the employee communication was much more important and had a higher priority than anything that they would do with any of their clients or their vendors, because that's something that people could leave over. You could lose employees over this. And if you lose your employees' trust and you don't have that first line of defense, which is your employees talking about your company in a very positive way, man, you really missed the boat. So the second thing after having a plan for succession, I would definitely want to have an employee communication plan and put that into action immediately. And part of that plan is knowing who's going to talk to what employees, when, how that information is going to be disseminated to those communicators, and to have that one spokesperson at the top who is going to be able to immediately say, we've got this. We understand this is a very difficult situation. We're going to answer all your questions, but to move quickly with those employees. So I think that would be the number two thing that I would want to make sure that I always had available.
Yeah, communication is key, right? And so I know some may think, well, how do I communicate when the issue is a personal one, but clearly this has fallout that's corporate related, right? So there needs to be a clear line between the individual situation and the business itself. And I think one way to keep this in mind is a company should stay focused on what matters to the stakeholders, our operations, our standards. We're not going to get into the business of litigating what these people did. In fact, over-explaining it can make it worse, right? So you're anchoring your message in your company values. You reinforce what you're all about, and that you're staying true north to what you believe in. You're demonstrating the trust that you've built and emphasizing that will continue.
Jordan, I'm interested in what you think about the fact that it went viral. So, and how that impacts customer and employee and client loyalty. What would you do in that scenario immediately if we picked up the phone and this happened with one of our clients?
Yeah, I mean, we have clients, who have hundreds of employees, right? So that clear communication plan, that is established, it's insert crisis here. Here's who's kind of the media leads. Here's the outline of what we're going to send to our team, who's working underneath of middle management and lower management in some cases, if the company's large enough. Because we know, as all former journalists, you're going to get that soundbite no matter what. And if it's not the C-suite talking to you, you're going to go to the next people. And if you're a good journalist, you're not going to turn that story until you have the sound that you need. So,
I'm interested though, in how would you combat the social part of it, the social media part of it that goes viral?
Right. I think on the social media side, you have to have a statement out there first. We always talk about, for our clients, when we were heavy into journalism and still working in the newsroom, X was kind of the go-to platform. Where you would post that, ultra official information. We've seen other companies now lean on Facebook as part of that too, as there's been some kind of ebb and flow at times in the social media landscape. But there has to be acknowledgement that something has happened here. Otherwise, you're sort of leading the internet to do what the internet does best, and that's spread rumors and gossip. A lot of times it's inaccurate. And it spreads like wildfire, especially when you have a case, quite like this, that's, more TMZ kind of gossipy related versus, corporate regulatory, more of your prototypical disaster that you would think of. Go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I was just thinking, and I would keep this in mind. Your employees may inadvertently add to that rumor mill. And so that's why when Diane says, look, get to them real quick, clear, confident, concise, communicate with your employees directly, because they're like, uh-oh, what do we do? Right. And then also make sure that you inform them how to handle any external inquiries. We would always say, don't talk to the media just yet. Direct them to the spokesperson, the head of marketing, whoever that assigned person is. Because I think when employees feel like they're informed, right, you're keeping them informed, they're far less to fill in the gaps with rumors. Oh, I heard this. And they will far more likely to reinforce that level of trust you're trying to convey.
I think too, it would make sense, and push back on me, guys, if you don't agree with this, but I think it would make sense to first craft a statement that is not general corporate ease. Figure out, is this something where you can be a little cheeky or not? I mean that this is okay. We get this was a disaster, and we're going. How you need to really think about how the tone and the tenor. Would you, though, pin that statement to the top of Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or would you put a statement on the top of two of those platforms saying all of our comments are going to be on this platform? Let's say it's LinkedIn, since it's a business, that it's going to be on LinkedIn. To try and manage more of what's being said. That's my first part of the question. So would you go to one? And the second part is, how would you respond, or would you respond to the comments that you're getting on that one outlet, if you go that way?
I don't mind the one outlet idea. I would just, it's not like you're posting and saying something about it, so you're not trying to engage people necessarily.
Exactly.
You're almost kind of post and ghost, like, hey, we understand the situation. Here's the deal, and not be flippant about it. I mean, in this case, on this story, everybody in the country kind of giggled, shook their head, and smiled, but not to be too flippant about it. They're, just make the statement and say, we'll have further updates here. Like, we're not going to get into this debate with you on whatever the platform is.
Right. And morality and things like that too. And I think on social media, you can't just change how you're communicating with your audiences on a dime because one incident happened. Right. You have companies that are very, strict and professional in the content that they post on social. And you have companies that, I think of Wendy's and Domino's that are on social media. You just never know what you're going to see because they're just so out there. So, to be very intentional about not sort of losing yourself, because an incident happened, and trying to turn it into something that's funny and cheeky when your longtime followers, a key piece of that audience can say, why are you treating it this way? Right. Like, you literally never talked to me like this online. And now this is, you're going to approach it this way, is kind of confusing with some mixed messaging. So to your point, Diane, like, leveraging that one platform, I think, is a great idea, but not sort of losing how you communicate on that platform to the people who are most important that you're talking to on a consistent basis, that'll still be there long after this scandal or crisis is in the rearview mirror.
I think that's true. One thing that they did, which I actually kind of like, is they went and got Gwyneth Paltrow, because her ex is the one, it was his concert. And he's the one who called it out. And then he got into a whole thing about, well, maybe they're not together. I mean, remember this? This was crazy when they're up on the kiss cam, and they, their reactions were, they were caught in the moment, literally, and their shame was just, they just went to hide, which was the exact wrong thing to do, because had they just like smiled and gone on, it would never have been a viral moment. But then they went to Gwyneth, and she did it was cheeky, but it was right down the line, I gotta say. And I thought, and this kind of leans into our media, insider media part, is it was very smart in that it said, okay, this happened. They had already, the people were already gone. They had done the right thing. And it was like, okay, how do we move on? So it was the next phase of their PR. So that was kind of interesting to me. But what they also did with that was they extended the story, because we know from the media, once they have a story like that, if there's something new, it's going to bring it up all over again. And so they got a ton of media on Gwyneth. Maybe they wanted that, but maybe people who had missed the whole thing, or it was now gone because, there's 27,000 other crises that happened in that intervening period. It was, it was one of those talkers for a day and a half and you let it go. Maybe that extended it. What do you guys think? And how would you have looked at it being in the media if something new had come out about the story?
Well, I think that's where building those relationships with the media pays off. So, which we always preach at M&C. And with something I was like, I don't know if I like the media, I trust the media is whatever your thoughts are. Having that open dialogue will help. Why? Well, the reporter knows, oh, no, I know Helen at company XYZ. She's a good egg. She always takes my call. Think of it this way. You're getting your voice in early in the process. You get to insert real verified information, not just the malarkey that's going out there on the internet. We have a situation, which I won't get into great details about, but we know of a company, the three of us, that had somebody on social media thing went wild when they thought somebody had fired a weapon outside a business, and it turned out it was a car that backfired.
Right.
Well, the reporter knew to call us, and we said, no, here's the situation. He goes, oh, all right, fine. It was over.
Yeah.
So that's just a small example of having that relationship with the media.
Yeah.
So the misinformation doesn't dominate the headline. Real information coming from you is a part of it.
Yeah.
I think to your, the other part of your question too, Diane, it coming out sort of in phase two. Phase one is, oh my gosh, this just happened. But I think that the creativity in, first of all, getting Gwyneth Paltrow for that.
Yeah.
And second of all, seeing the memes that were coming out, kind of reading the room, like how are people reacting to this? Are they outraged because of this horrible moral, compass that had been flipped upside down? And how could they, how dare they? And it really kind of turned out that, the majority of people were just, unfortunately for the two of them, making fun of them on the internet.
Yeah.
And, because, the CEO eventually left, the HR director stepped down at some point. The company at that point really didn't have, much loyalty to save face for them. So we're going to lean into it as well. We're going to also turn it into a little bit of a joke, but also do it in a way that we know that people are paying attention to this in this, this perspective.
Right.
So we know we're going to capture the people who we want to see this video and reinforce that we're going to continue to do the things that we do really, really well as a company, without tuning out from a boring, super late to the game corporate statement.
Yeah.
I think that that's interesting. I thought two things when I saw the Gwyneth Paltrow thing. I thought, okay, this is very smart because it is kind of cheeky, and as we're moving on, and we all know what happened. But my question for all of this was, who was the important target audience in all this? Did this really impact their vendors as far as trust? Did this really impact their clients as far as trust? But how did it play with their employees as far as trust? Were their employees, had this been an issue within the company before? That's where I would have been very, very targeted and careful about bringing Gwyneth on and kind of making fun of this. Because if there had been issues where you had interoffice romance or whatever going on at that company, if that was, I have worked at places where it was rampant in the places. So in that scenario, I think the really target audience for all this that you're really talking to are your employees, because I don't think this goes to any kind of trust issues with the company itself and how they proceed and work through this. So really, you're talking to the employees with this. And at that point, there's two things. One is, if you go out with Gwyneth Paltrow, that means that every type of media is going to replay the kiss cam all over again, right? So you're going to see it tons. So it either is going to play well with that employee audience, and they're going to say, well, okay, we knew this was going on, whatever. Or it's not, because there's going to be other issues that kind of trickle down from this, or other people feel like they weren't treated correctly when they were in a situation. So you'd really have to understand extremely well what audience you're talking to, because in this, I don't think it was the public audience. And I kind of felt like that's why it was being put out. The audience,
you felt it was for the employees, you think?
I think well, I don't know. The way I looked at it from the outside, not being in any of those rooms, was that it was out there to say to the world, okay, look, we don't take ourselves real seriously. This happened. We're going to do this. And it didn't get a lot of play. The Gwyneth Paltrow thing didn't get nearly as much play as the original viral.
No.
But I would have been concerned about how that would play within my company itself. And I think that as a PR pro, you always have to remember those employees have to be number one. And I'm not saying that it played badly because I don't know that answer. I just know that that would have been my biggest concern is
Okay.
how would that have played within the group, depending on where they are, and reading the room with them would be very, very important. So
I
I think
think, yeah, I think the two most important things is one, they made a statement so they could, they
yes,
could participate in it. And the two, that when using Gwyneth Paltrow, obviously when you saw her, you're like, hey, what's this? It made you pay attention. Now, that said, somebody who owns a small business going, yeah, thanks, guys. I don't have George Clooney on speed dial. What do I do? I
right,
still think the most important thing is that you made the statement and got on it in a hurry.
right. And I think in this situation that you make the statement for the general public and you're
Mhm.
on top of it and
Yep.
and you have the one person and all of that. But that the second most important thing is that whoever works for you is part of the program. They understand what's going on. They feel like they have a voice in all of it. They feel like their needs have been considered in whatever the company's doing. And I that's my point in all this is I think sometimes that's the one thing that gets forgotten when you're in the midst of a crisis and you've got media coming and you're thinking about losing trust and are we going to it's a business financial decision, but there's a human decision from within your company that really can impact your finances that you
Yeah.
have to really think about as well. And I
Right.
think that when you're doing a resiliency plan, a brand protection plan, that the the communication with the employees is one of the most important things
Yeah.
that you have to have that nailed
Yep.
in order to get through any crisis. What do you guys think?
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to what we said earlier is have a plan in place. When
Right.
this hits, whatever it is, that okay, who's in charge of social media? So we're not advertising something flippant when we should be focusing on this. Who's talking to employees? Who's talking to, oh gosh, Jane is on vacation. Who's second in charge? Have that all figured out beforehand will help you.
Absolutely. And I think for PR pros, this is an opportunity to have that plan ready to go so that no matter what the crisis is, you're the person that C suite turns to when they
Mhm.
have a challenge or a crisis to say, okay, from a communication standpoint, what do we do next?
Mhm.
So many people in the C suite think a crisis plan is blocking and tackling, and it is. There's no doubt about it. But the communications part of it is just a small part of the overall plan.
Yeah.
The bottom line is your reputation is the whole plan if you think about it. And
Yeah.
so when you can become that person who can calmly say, okay, we've got this. These are several options. Here's who we're talking to with each one of these. Then you've got some resiliency that's really out there and in your, it's a huge part of the plan, but you're also a huge part of the plan, which raises the professionality of the whole group. It raises your reputation because remember when something like this happens and you're already you've got a resilient plan for your company. Guess what? You are resilient as well, and
Sure.
because the more that happens, the more it's going to build how much they rely on you.
And we know that through our survey data too, reputation damage among cyber attacks and online reviews and things like that are among some of the top sort of topics that keep people up at night at 2 a.m. And we keep coming back to, the people who work for you. The reputation damage may not just be the people who are buying your product, but that reputation damage of not communicating clearly to people who have worked for you for a long, long time and have said,
Mhm.
man, you couldn't just, clue us in here and give us a little bit, more to go on other than, kind of a, corporate speak internal statement.
Mhm.
That's really, really important. And I agree with you, Diane, that it's lost sometimes in this. And that's why when we're looking at things, through a brand protection PR perspective, that's an audience that, we bring front and center because they may not be buying product from you, but they're the lifeblood of your company.
Absolutely.
Without them, you don't have a product to sell and you don't have a company to run.
I
Um,
agree. And that's where that succession People think of succession, somebody who they sell the company or they retire or heaven forbid something happens to them. But no matter what you're doing for resiliency, that should be one of your plans, because you never know when somebody's going to be in a situation where they have to leave quickly, and who's going to be the number two, and who can those employees, as well as your clients, know is in charge and that they've got the wheel. And that I just saw, my analogy here is going to be crazy, but I just saw a school bus. I don't know if you saw this video yesterday or the day before, where the school bus driver had an asthma attack and she passed out, and the kids jumped in and stopped the bus. What was amazing about that is how calm they were. And so that's where you want to be as the PR pro. You want to be the calm person that takes the wheel, because you know where the bus is going, because you've already helped them figure out what they're going to do for the next step.
Yeah, we're talking about kind of a rapid response protocol. Right. And so I'll sound like a broken record today, because I see, if you already have that figured out in your plan, then you'll know, oh my gosh, Jane, the founder, is in Taiwan on vacation. Now what do we do? No, you'll already have that figured out. Who's taking over what? Who's talking to the employees? And that just that lends to the credibility that, all right, we're on it. We understand. We got you.
Absolutely. So great points today. I think this is an interesting one to kind of look at, because I think when you really start to dissect it, there's some new things that come out. For me, on customer loyalty, it's also employee loyalty, and how do you make sure that those employees are top of mind when something like this happens at a company? How about you guys?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and again, that's where having things predetermined, you're like, well, I don't know what the crisis is. How do I do that? No, the basics. I'm thinking like decision-making authority, messaging frameworks. What channels do you communicate through? It depends on your business. Maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's all of them. Who speaks? Who approves the messaging? How are we talking to the employees? You can have all those things figured out. It reduces confusion, it speeds up your response time, and you remain in control.
That's right.
And I think too, just being able to measure the media response, because if you're Big J, this is not a news story. But as you're competing for clicks and likes and attention online, this is a hell of a news story. So understanding what that landscape is looking like, being able to effectively sort of analyze that, leverage your relationships that you have with the media so you know what's coming next because they're asking you for it, is really important too. And that can help, any PR pro craft what is that next response, which was, for those folks, the Gwyneth Paltrow video.
Absolutely. And lastly, just have start forecasting, start thinking about things that could happen. Because as we talked about, now, I doubt any of us would have that on our list of the top 3 things that could happen in the next 6 months.
Who would have thought that? Yeah, right.
Exactly, right. But if you plan for succession, you've got it there. If you've planned for employee communications, you pull that part in. Now you already have the blocking and tackling done, because you were forecasting for something else, that these pieces can be put together very quickly. So again, when it happens, you're like, I got this, I got this, I got this. Okay, I got the plan. We can move. And that inertia thing is so important. It's all about moving when you have something like this, and not being a deer in the headlights, which is what is going to happen to a lot of people in the C-suite. So if you can be the one who says, it's okay, we've got this, these are the first 3 things we're going to do, then you are set to continue moving, and you can mold and craft and change all the way through that. But you're out there, you have responded, you look like it's completely under control, whether or not it is, to be really honest with you, because crises change. But it's a really smart way to make sure that your value in any organization is also recognized, because you were the one who, like those kids on the school bus, ran up and took the wheel and said, okay, we can do this, and got it together. So thank you.
I would say for the bottom line for me, speed matters, but credibility matters even more, right? Yes. So being prepared allows you to do both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jordan, you want to take us home?
Yeah, appreciate everybody tuning in to the Move the Stairs podcast. If you like this kind of content, leave us a comment, send us a direct message on LinkedIn. This is sort of something new that we've been trying a little bit this year. and would welcome your suggestions as well. So until then, we'll see you next time on the next all new episode of the Move the Stairs podcast.